All right, let's get right into it. I'm going to ask you a question that might just completely change how you look at, well, everything around you. We're going to dig into this wild idea that the objects in your room, your chair, maybe a rock in your garden, a hammer in your toolbox, might just have their own inner lives.
So, here it is, the big question at the heart of all this. What is it like to be a stone? Now, I know what you're thinking. That sounds like something you'd read in a poetry book, right? But here's the thing. This question is being asked with total 100% seriousness.
And I really want to hammer this home. This is not a metaphor. We're not talking about some artsy, poetic idea. This is a legitimate, philosophical investigation into the nature of experience and reality itself.
Okay, so let's just get it out of the way. I get it. This whole question sounds completely absurd to our modern ears, right? We're so used to seeing the world in a very specific way, and this idea it just shatters that.
I mean, we all just kind of assume that objects are just objects. A stone is just an inert thing. It doesn't think, it doesn't feel, it just sits there. But here's where it gets tricky. The real question is, how do we actually know that for sure? I mean, think about it. You know you have an inner life, a conscious experience. But how do you know for a fact that your coffee mug doesn't? We're just assuming it stops with us, or with animals. And this is where things get really fascinating, because this seemingly crazy question about a stone actually connects to one of the biggest, most profound mysteries in all of science and philosophy. I'm talking about the problem of consciousness itself.
So there's this thing called the hard problem of consciousness, and it's a doozy. It basically asks, why? Why do all these physical things happening in our brain, neurons firing, chemical swapping, give rise to the feeling of being alive? Why do we have this rich, subjective inner experience at all? We can map all the brain activity we want, but we have zero explanation for the feeling part. And if we can't even explain why it happens in us, how can we be so sure about where it doesn't happen?
This puts us at a major fork in the road. On one side, you've got the standard assumption that consciousness is this super rare, special thing that just poof, appeared in complex brains like ours. It's an exception to the rule. But on the other side, there's a much wilder idea called panpsychism. And it flips the whole thing on its head. It says, what if consciousness isn't the exception? What if it's a fundamental feature of matter, present everywhere in some tiny, basic form?
So yeah, let's really lean into that radical alternative. What if our entire assumption is backward? What if experience isn't some rare fluke, but the basic rule of the whole universe? What if the world, in its own way, is actually awake?
Okay, so how do you even begin to explore an idea like that? Well, you can't exactly put a stone in an fMRI machine. So instead, we're going to use a really cool philosophical tool called speculative phenomenology. Now that sounds complicated, but the idea is pretty simple. It's not science. It's more like a disciplined thought experiment. You take what you know about an object's physical reality, its physics, its chemistry, and you use your imagination to explore what its inner life might be like.
All right, enough with the theory. Let's actually try this thing out. We're going to take a little tour through the possible inner lives of a few everyday things. And we're going to start with what seems like the toughest case of all, the stone.
So for a stone, think about time. It would be completely alien to us. Our lives are just this rapid-fire flicker of moments, right? But for a stone, an event could be something like a glacier slowly grinding over it for, say, 10,000 years. And maybe, for the stone, that entire 10,000-year period is experienced as just one single intense moment of pressure, of being scraped, polished, and moved.
And what about space? A stone wouldn't think in terms of maps or coordinates. Its experience of its place in the universe would be much more raw, much more direct. It would be the constant, unending feeling of its own existence, that relentless downward pull of gravity, and the equal, unyielding push from the earth below. Its entire being is just this pure physical sensation of pressure and weight.
Okay, now let's think about something a little more complex, like a chair. From this viewpoint, an empty chair isn't just sitting there doing nothing. It exists in a state of active readiness. Its entire physical shape, its very structure, is all pointing towards a single purpose. It's a bundle of potential energy, just waiting to be used. You could say its whole being is a kind of waiting.
And when someone finally sits down, the chair knows them. Not with eyes or ears, of course. It knows them through the totally unique signature of their weight, their posture, how they shift around. Think about an old favorite armchair. Over years and years of use, it develops this kind of material intimacy. Its cushions and frame are literally shaped by the physical presence of the person who uses it most. Now for something totally different, a hammer. Its experience is way more dynamic, more focused. Its whole life is really defined by two things, the arc of the swing and that one single critical moment of impact. It's all about that clean, pure transfer of kinetic energy from its head to the nail.
So you could imagine that a good strike, one where all the energy goes right into the nail, might feel like a kind of rightness to the hammer, a sense of purpose fulfilled. But a bad strike, you know the one that sends that awful stinging vibration right up the handle, that would be the physical experience of wrongness, of energy being wasted, of failing at the one thing it's designed to do. Okay. This is all a pretty wild ride of speculation, I'll admit. But so what? Why does any of this matter? What's the point of looking at the world in this incredibly strange way?
Well, it turns out each of these objects can teach us something profound. From the stone, we get this lesson about the sufficiency of just being. You don't always have to be doing something to exist in a meaningful way. From the chair, we learn that service can be a form of completion, that to be used well is to fully become what you are. And from the hammer, we get the power of commitment, the absolute necessity of following through to actually make a change in the world.
But look, at the end of the day, the real point of this whole thought experiment isn't to prove that your desk chair secretly has feelings. It's not about that. The real value is in challenging our deepest, most baked-in assumptions about the world. It's about breaking down that hard wall we put up between us, the subjects, and them, the objects. It's about reawakening our sense of wonder for the amazing material world we're a part of.
So I'll leave you with this final, amazing thought. Maybe, just maybe, if we learn to pay attention in a completely new way, we'll start to notice that the world all around us is, in fact, dreaming itself awake.